Deep in the Alaskan wilderness, far from any grocery stores or paved roads, lives a woman whose story continues to inspire millions. Her name is Edna Korth, one of the most admired and mysterious figures from the show The Last Alaskans. Out there, rationing food and supplies isn't just a lifestyle choice. It's survival. If they run out of anything, there's no store to run to, no neighbor to borrow from, and no safety net waiting nearby. Yet for Edna, this isolation has always been home. Over the years, people have admired her for her calm strength, her steady smile, and her deep connection to nature. But recently, some fans began to notice a change. Her eyes seemed sadder, her smile weaker. It made people wonder what was going on behind that strong face. Who exactly is Edna Korth? What makes her so different? And why do people say we were warned about her before it was too late? Edna was born on January 25, 1954, in the small Eskimo village of Savunga, located on St. Lawrence Island, a remote area in the Bering Sea, only about 36 miles from Russia. Life there was not easy. Cold winds, short summers, and endless winters shaped everyone who lived there. While many little girls grew up playing with dolls, Edna learned how to set traps, fish in icy waters, and prepare furs with her father and uncle. Her mother taught her to cook, preserve food, and take care of a family with whatever the land provided. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was one filled with purpose and pride. From her family, she learned that nature is not an enemy. It's a partner that must be respected. Every fish caught and every animal trapped meant another day of survival. These lessons made her resilient, patient, and wise beyond her years. She grew up understanding that the simplest things in life, warmth, food, and family, were the most valuable treasures of all. Growing up in such a harsh environment gave Edna something that few people in the modern world have: inner peace. When she looked at the moon, it wasn't just light in the sky. It was a reminder that even in darkness, there's beauty. Civilization, with its bright lights and constant noise, never called to her. She preferred the quiet hum of the wind, the steady rhythm of waves, and the sound of snow crunching under her boots. For Edna, this was not just life. It was the only life that made sense. While other girls dreamed of city lights and new clothes, Edna dreamed of passing down her people's traditions to her children someday, teaching them to trap, fish, and survive with their own hands. She never saw herself as different or special. She was simply doing what generations before her had done, living with nature, not against it. That simple truth would later become her greatest strength when life tested her in ways she could never imagine. Finding love in such isolation was never easy. For a while, Edna found happiness with a Swedish biologist who shared her love for the wild. They were deeply in love and planned a life together, both drawn to the quiet beauty of Alaska. Their joy grew even more when they discovered she was expecting a child. But that happiness didn't last long. Her fiancé died tragically in a plane crash, leaving Edna heartbroken and pregnant. She gave birth to a baby girl named Millie, but her world felt empty without the man she loved. For years, she carried the weight of that loss, raising her daughter alone and surviving through sheer strength. Most people would have left the wilderness after such a tragedy, but not Edna. Instead, she found comfort in the land that had always been her home. The same winds that once chilled her now seemed to whisper strength, and the same mountains that looked harsh now stood as reminders of endurance. Through her grief, she remained unbroken. Life has a way of bringing together souls who are meant to meet. In the 1970s, a young man named Edna Korth from Wisconsin was searching for something more meaningful than ordinary life. He longed for the wilderness, adventure, and freedom. After several failed attempts to live alone in the wild, he realized he needed to learn from those who truly understood survival. The Eskimo people of St. Lawrence Island. That's where he met Edna. She was quiet but confident, with a calm strength that drew him in. At first, they were just friends. Edna learned from her father and uncle, who taught him to fish, trap, and read the land. But over time, friendship turned to admiration, and admiration turned into love. Still, Edna knew Edna had suffered great loss, and he didn't rush her. Eventually, their hearts aligned, and they decided to build a life together. Not in the city, or even in a village, but deep in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, one of the most remote places on Earth. Their love story was not built on luxury, but on survival, trust, and shared purpose. In 1980, Edna and Edna married, and 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter named Colleen. For a while, life was beautiful. They had their little cabin, the wilderness, and each other. But tragedy struck once again in June 1984. During a family canoe trip, the boat capsized in the river. The current was too strong, and little Colleen was swept away. Despite desperate efforts to save her, they couldn't reach her in time. Her body was never found, The loss was unbearable. Edna had already lost her first love, and now she had lost her child. Most people would have given up, packed their things, and returned to civilization. But Edna didn't. For her, leaving would mean the wilderness had defeated her, and she wasn't raised to quit. Even through her tears, she stood strong beside her husband, continuing to live off the land in honor of her daughter. Years later, they built a memorial for Colleen on a nearby hill, a quiet place where they still bring flowers and remember her each year. It's both a wound and a tribute, a symbol of love, loss, and unbreakable spirit. Despite their heartbreak, Edna and Haimo continued to build their life together. They went on to have 2 more daughters, Rhonda and Kryn, both of whom grew up just like their parents, strong, self-reliant, and fearless. Edna taught them everything she knew: how to fish, trap, cook, and survive in the harsh wilderness. While many mothers might teach their daughters to fit into society, Edna taught hers to stand on their own, no matter what life threw their way. Her cabin wasn't just a home. It was a classroom where survival was the main lesson. Even in freezing temperatures and long, dark winters, she remained the center of her family, cooking, repairing clothes, and ensuring everyone had what they needed. Haimo often said that without Edna, he would never have made it through so many years in the wild. Her wisdom, patience, and inner calm were what kept their family together. Through every hardship, she stood tall, proving that real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's quiet, steady, and unshakable. For decades, Edna and Haimo lived peacefully in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, a place untouched by modern life. But in 1980, the U.S. government declared it a protected area, banning any new human settlement. Only a few families were allowed to stay, and the Korths were one of them. They were given the right to live there for 100 years before all human presence must end. This meant Edna and Haimo would likely be among the last people to ever live there, the true Last Alaskans. Over time, that realization began to weigh heavily on Edna. The land that had given her everything, her family, her identity, her peace, would one day no longer be home. She began to notice her children leaving for the cities, building lives in Fairbanks and even Canada. She was proud of them, but deep down, she knew the era of true wilderness living was ending. For her, it was like watching the end of a world. Not just for her family, but for a way of life that had existed for generations. As the years passed, the once young woman who could hike for miles and chop firewood with ease began to feel the weight of time. Her steps grew slower, her hands weaker. The same land she once tamed now demanded more effort than ever before. Still, she refused to give in. Each year, she and Haimo would make the difficult trip back to their cabin in the fall, spending the winter in solitude before returning to Fairbanks to visit family. It's a balance between 2 worlds, the wilderness that made her who she is and the modern world where her children and grandchildren now live. Despite the aches and pains of age, Edna's spirit remains as strong as ever. She still wakes early, still works with her hands, and still carries that calm, quiet wisdom that has inspired countless viewers. Her life is a reminder that happiness doesn't come from wealth or comfort. It comes from peace, love, and connection to something bigger than ourselves. Today, Edna Korth stands as a living legend. Her story is not just about survival. It's about courage, patience, and love. She has faced more pain than most people could imagine, yet she has always chosen to rise again. Through every loss, she found purpose. Through every hardship, she found gratitude. To her, Alaska isn't just a place, it's a teacher, a healer, and a home. Even as her time in the refuge comes to an end, her legacy continues through her children and through everyone who has watched her story unfold. Her daughter, Kryn, who still carries on the wilderness tradition with her own husband, represents the next generation of strength and independence. Edna's life reminds us that real freedom is not about escaping society. It's about finding peace wherever you are, even in the harshest conditions. When most people hear the name Edna Korth, they think of survival, a woman who faced brutal winters, isolation, and unimaginable loss, yet never surrendered. But her story is much deeper than what we saw on television. Behind every episode of The Last Alaskans, there was a woman whose courage held her family together through silence, through storms, and through sorrow. Edna never wanted fame or recognition. She only wanted peace. But life, as it often does, chose her to be an example of endurance, of patience, and of the strength that comes from a humble heart. For Edna, every sunrise in the Arctic was both a blessing and a test. Every day demanded her full attention, her focus, her discipline. When she woke up, she didn't check a phone or read the news. She looked at the sky, the snow, and the wind, her only messengers, and decided what needed to be done to keep her family safe for another day. There's a quiet power in living that way, a wisdom that most of the modern world has forgotten. While many chase comfort, Edna learned early that comfort can make you weak. Survival sharpens you. It teaches you to value every bite of food, every drop of water, and every moment of warmth. And that's exactly what made her so special. She lived with nothing extra, yet she always seemed to have everything she needed. Her story is not just about Alaska. It's about what it means to be truly alive. When the world first met Edna and Haimo through the Last Alaskans, people were instantly drawn to them. They were not actors or celebrities. They were real, living examples of what humanity looked like before electricity, before supermarkets, before modern convenience. Audiences admired Haimo's hard work and determination, but it was Edna's calm presence that truly touched hearts. She didn't speak much, but when she did, every word carried weight. You could see the history in her eyes. Decades of cold winters, laughter, loss, and survival. People across the world fell in love with her not because she lived off the grid, but because she represented something we've all lost: contentment. In a society obsessed with more, she showed us that happiness isn't about abundance. It's about gratitude. Viewers noticed that Edna never complained, even when facing freezing nights or food shortages. Instead, she smiled, cooked a meal, and continued with quiet faith. That was her strength. Even fans who lived thousands of miles away began to rethink their own lives after watching her. Some said, "If Edna can be grateful in the snow with no heat, I can be grateful for what I have." That's how powerful her influence became. Not through speeches or fame, but through example. Edna never called herself a teacher, but she has taught the world more lessons than many realize. One of her greatest lessons is the power of simplicity. In her eyes, life doesn't need to be complicated to be beautiful. Every task, from chopping wood to making soup, carries meaning. She often says that living close to the land makes you understand what really matters. When you work for every meal, when you depend on nature for everything, you begin to appreciate how fragile and precious life truly is. Another lesson she gives is about patience. In the wilderness, nothing happens quickly. You wait for the river to thaw, you wait for the animals to move, you wait for the storms to pass. Impatience is dangerous. It can lead to mistakes, and mistakes can mean death. But Edna turned patience into peace. She didn't fight time. She flowed with it. That same patience carried her through the hardest moments. The loss of her child, the loneliness of endless winters, and the growing frailty of age. For her, endurance wasn't about being tough on the outside. It was about staying calm and believing that every challenge, no matter how painful, would eventually pass. Today, Edna is in her early 70s. Her hair has turned white like the snow that surrounds her cabin. Her hands, once strong and quick, now move slower, but they still work. Sewing, cooking, and preparing food for the long months ahead. The Arctic winters haven't gotten any easier, but her body has learned every rhythm of the land. She knows when the river ice will break, when the caribou will pass, and when the days will finally grow long again. Still, the wilderness is changing. The climate has grown unpredictable. The snow melts earlier, and the animals appear less often. Even the once frozen ground now softens underfoot. For someone like Edna, who spent her life understanding nature's balance, this change feels like losing an old friend. She often says, "The land is getting tired." Her words carry sadness, not just for the environment, but for what it means for future generations. Her daughters may never live as she and Haimo did. The world they built their lives around is slowly disappearing. That realization weighs heavily on her heart. But Edna, ever the optimist, believes that even if the wilderness changes, the lessons it teaches will always remain. At the center of Edna's story is her love for Edna Korth. Their marriage has survived decades of isolation, tragedy and hardship, something rare in any world, especially one as harsh as the Arctic. While Haimo is known for his determination and energy, even he admits that Edna is the soul of their family. "She's the strong one," he once said. Together, they've faced the coldest nights, the emptiest cupboards, and the most painful losses. Yet their love only deepened. When they're shown together on camera, it's easy to miss how powerful their partnership really is. Haimo might be outside chopping wood or checking traps, but Edna is the one keeping their world running, cooking, mending, and offering the quiet reassurance that everything will be okay. In many ways, she's the emotional anchor of their life together. Their marriage is not built on luxury or convenience, but on shared purpose and deep respect. After more than 40 years, they still laugh together, still share stories by the fire, still find joy in each other's presence. It's the kind of love that doesn't need words. It's felt in every glance, every smile, every act of care. In a time where many relationships fall apart over small disagreements,